Thank you. Good afternoon to everybody and welcome to the panel, the Caribbean and Latam, Building Innovation Hubs in Emerging Markets. I'm Ruth Hooliston from IDB Lab based in Barbados, and I'm happy to co-moderate this panel with my colleague Nicole Aurillac, who's based in Panama. Today, we're going to be discussing the role of innovation ecosystems through the life cycle of startups, so from community building all the way through to Series A investment and scale. Our panel includes leading innovation hubs across the Caribbean and Central America, and we're going to discuss with them approaches to accelerating innovation across different ecosystems, from nascent early stage to more mature startup markets. So without further ado, let's meet our panel of champions. We are joined today by Selwyn Cambridge, who is founder and executive director of 10 Habitat based in Barbados. Camila Lecaros, who's a managing director at Masschallenge based in Mexico. Naomi Flori, who's executive director at Scala Latam based in Panama. Kirk-AnthonyHamilton, who is with the co-founder of Tech Beach based in Jamaica, and PabloSantaeufemia, who is CEO and co-founder of Bridge for Billions based out of Spain. So welcome, everybody. I'm really excited to kick off this discussion. You're all playing an absolutely critical role in emerging ecosystems. So Selwyn, let me start with you. You have been a first mover in this space, and you have really built, from the ground up, the innovation community here in Barbados. And in a few short years, you've really helped to move the needle. Today, the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Barbados is really expanding fast. So could you share with us your model and some of the key factors that have enabled you, 10 Habitat, to catalyze this startup ecosystem? And talk us through some of the pivots that you've had to make along the way to meet the needs of emerging entrepreneurial ecosystem startups. Thank you very much. Over to you, Selwyn.
Thank you very much, Ruth. And I'm very happy to be here amongst, I think, a very innovative and esteemed panel. I see that, when we talk about innovation in the Caribbean, and if I were to take a look at it from the perspective of Barbados and what we've recognized doing a lot of work in the rest of the region, that there are a lot of similarities. When we started in an environment that was essentially designed to support lifestyle ventures. So it's really self-employment, where individuals were more along the lines of subsistence type businesses as opposed to opportunity-based businesses, where they're trying to go after a significant opportunity, build on solving real problems and scale solutions. And because of that, a lot of the mechanisms that were put in place to support these types of individuals were designed for that. So what you also had was a lot of persons when we got into the marketplace were literally coming just for initial support to just launch another business like someone else. And that was never going to be something that was sustainable. So what we had to do was to literally bring entrepreneurs through a process that re-engineer the way they think. And that had a lot to do with mindset. And so we had all of these really elaborate programs designed to develop ideas, designed to develop entrepreneurs. But when they came into those programs, the level of thinking was still on subsistence type business. I'm literally developing a business to replace a job that I lost or to fulfill some underemployment. And because of that, we literally had to make a significant shift in one, exposing entrepreneurs to a new way of thinking, exposing them to a new way of collaborating, because that has been a big challenge, and then starting to get them comfortable with the idea of giving up a piece of what they're trying to build to gain a whole lot more of what they're trying to achieve. And so a significant part of our programming started to focus on mindset development. So we started to do a lot more on that. And I'm happy to say, as a result of that, we started to attract a different type of entrepreneur. We start to experience a different type of thinking when it came to building business. And we like to say, it's really learning by osmosis. You put these types of entrepreneurs in a space with a different type of entrepreneur, and ideas clashing, you get this cross-fertilization of ideas, and amazing things happen. And so for us, that's particularly what we've had to do. And then part of the pivot is really starting to recognize the capacity deficits, right? A lot of entrepreneurs were trying to develop businesses that were either tech enabled or full tech ventures, but did not have the technical capacity to be able to execute on those ideas. And so we made the bold step of partnering with a global coding academy, and launched one of the first coding academies in the English-speaking Caribbean to literally offset the skills deficit that exists, and started to not only expose those entrepreneurs to that technology skill, but started to build a pool of technologies that then can support the startup ecosystem. So we started to look at how we can create this symbiotic relationship to facilitate some of the amazing ideas that we saw coming through.
Thank you so much, Selwyn, for sharing your experiences in the Caribbean. So mindset and capacity building through collaboration with other organizations. That's great. So now let's travel to Mexico. Camila, since 2016, we know that Masschallenge Mexico has helped accelerate 167 startups and raise 400 million for these startups. Now you're bringing this program to Central America. Tell us a little bit about the Masschallenge model and lessons of bringing this type of programs into the ecosystems of smaller countries like those in Central America.
Thank you very much, Nicole. I'm very excited to be here, and thank you for the invitation. So when we started Masschallenge here in Mexico, we knew that the ecosystem was starting to develop. We thought that the best way to approach that ecosystem in Mexico was an accelerator, the same that we do in Boston, in Switzerland, in Israel, in Houston. But when we started looking in Central America, we saw that the ecosystems were very underdeveloped. So what we figured out was the best way to start building the ecosystem was to do bootcamps, where we do a call for applications of startups. And what we have seen is that they are in very early stage. And in that bootcamp, we try to do three things. The first is give information and give content of how to grow the startup. The second is to give mentorship. So in each of the countries where we are, we look for mentors and like role models that can help them. And we bring also more role models from other countries so that they can help them. And lastly, which is very important, is how to build a community. So we try to interact with actors that are in the ecosystem, that maybe in earlier stages, so that we can work together. And this has been pretty successful. We have, in less than a year, we have already helped 67 startups. And what is pretty interesting is that we see how these mentors continue after the bootcamp to work with the startups, that get involved more in community events. And I think that if we are able to get the startups to have an ecosystem of mentors and different organizations to help them grow and to go to, not to the early stage, but to the next phases, I think that is the best way. One of the things that we haven't seen that active is the investment side. But with that, I think that that's the best way. Like, I think that with time, we'll get more investors interested in those startups.
Thank you so much. So similar to what Selwyn shared, like recognizing that in Central America, and in this case also in the Caribbean, the ecosystems need to start maybe a step back of the models that you had envisioned initially. So now let's talk to Noemi. Noemi, based in Panama, we understand that Scala Latam was born out of a need you identified in the local ecosystem, which is those working with those SMEs and startups that actually make it through the incubation stage and that they need support to grow. And we also understand that in the last year, you have worked with a subset of companies specifically working in the digital economy. Tell us what is the Scala Latam model in summary, and what are some of these main hurdles that companies face to scale in the Central America ecosystems as they stand today?
Thank you, Nicole and Ruth, and the rest of the IDB Lab Forum for the invitation. And just like you were saying, there's a need for ecosystem innovation integration. So I'm going to start with telling you a little bit about Scala Latam. Scala is a platform focused on generating scalable startups and integrating the different actors of the regional innovation ecosystem to meet their needs and foster innovation and scalable growth. That's what we do. As far as our model, we use a funnel approach to identify startups with scalable potential. Then, of course, we work with with their teams to polish their models and act as a liaison between players of the ecosystem. If I start at the top of the funnel, we have the ecosystem articulation stage that includes our regional events, such as webinars, forums, demo days, etc. And hundreds of startups participate actively. If we go down our funnel, then we have our corporate innovation programs. We identify real industry needs through our corporate partners, and we help them develop the innovation culture within the organization and implement open innovation practices and keep up with the latest trends from prime innovation centers around the world. We practice open innovation to help corporates identify their needs and then find innovative startups that will help them fulfill these needs. And of course, we work with these startups to develop them and maximize their potential. Actually, this program is based on a methodology developed during an IDB lab program a few years back that was executed with Capatec, the Panamanian Chamber of Technology. So what's unique about this program is that we have startups from other Latin American countries even working with Panamanian startups on real industry needs and creating new companies or spin-offs. And it's really, really interesting what's happening now. And this started just a few months back, so we're developing now. So Scala supports all this with business services to these startups, our acceleration program, escalation program that have both executive education component and mentorship, business mentorship, and industry mentorship. Scala provides the accompaniment they require to go on, and we provide the access to our investment platform. So in fact, we're starting to create this whole ecosystem in our region. And of course, there are different initiatives going on right now. And so we contribute and we're working actively to develop it.
Thank you so much, Noemi. And it's great to hear from Masschallenge as well, the entry points for the very nascent ecosystem. And the common thread that I'm hearing from both yourself, Noemi, and your colleague is that it's the importance of integrating the ecosystem and making the connections between, in your case, Noemi, you're facing the corporate world, you're looking at a slightly larger scale, and I think that's a really good segue for Tech Beach. So Kirk, you're really making some waves with Tech Beach over the last few years. When we originally spoke some years ago, when you laid out your vision to host an acceleration program, Tech Beach Retreat, and to really kind of further your role as a connector of startups who are looking to scale. You've really made some significant strides, and it's of course recognizing that you've had to pivot along the way, and you've pivoted to a virtual model given the pandemic, but you're still very focused on linking startups to leading global markets, and I think that's a really unique proposition. It's a necessity in the Caribbean, even though overall it's a nascent ecosystem. There are, of course, startups who are ready to scale. And we'd be really interesting to hear a little bit more about your model, the key elements of this global approach, and some of the key lessons that you've experienced over the last few years. So over to you, Kirk.
Thank you, Ruth, and it's a pleasure to be presenting alongside this esteemed panel. When it comes to Tech Beach and our vision, from day one, we set out with the ideology that says that the Caribbean could emerge as a real hub for technology and innovation, not just from a regional perspective, but hopefully from a global perspective, looking at all the dynamics and opportunities we have to offer to the world. So despite starting out at a time when the conversation was not really mature, no one was really talking about digitization and technology, much like most of my colleagues here on this panel would experience in their early days. We have done the work to really stand up a narrative that says this is what is possible, and now we're seeing where folks are willing to follow that lead and get involved and pursue ideas that go beyond the shores of their respective islands. So we launched this accelerator program this year alongside IDB Lab, and we're proud of what we're seeing already, in the sense that most people looking on at the Caribbean would believe that there's not much happening here in the way of activity to support the idea that there's a need for venture capital or even basic level angel investment. What we've managed to unfold so far with the companies that we've been identifying and accepting into the program is that there are meaningful ideas being built in the region that could propel into global opportunities. The pandemic has forced us to pivot, as you pointed to. When we were fleshing this out with the IDB, the plan was for a very physical operation that would see people flying in all the time, and much in the spirit of Tech Beach taking advantage of the tourism infrastructure of the region. What virtual has done for us, though, is expanded the reach of what the program is. So when we were starting out, it was to be focused on Barbados, Trinidad, Jamaica, and the Bahamas. We are now seeing entrepreneurs from as far as Bali and many other, more advanced markets like North America, Europe, and such. We hope to see more results in places like Latin America as we go forward, because we do want to create a deep connection there. But as I mentioned earlier, we've been quite impressed with what we see happening. So just to give a quick outlook, as you mentioned, our thing has always been about how can we connect startups with the rest of the world and resources from around the world. We're proud of our relationships with organizations like AWS and Google and such, who then provide either credits and such to stand up these firms, or they provide mentorship, roadmaps, and access to these firms. And now the thing that we're most proud of is that we're seeing companies getting checks, which is the most important thing to us, right? We're seeing the fuel being added to the fire. That has always been the burning desire for us, is that, as I think Selwyn even pointed to earlier, people building things that are substantial enough to quantify the need for investment. And those checks are being written all over the place. We've seen entrepreneurs getting checks from as far as Silicon Valley, which is a great validator. But now we see a need for our next evolution, and we're intent on adding a fund to the layer of this accelerator system that we've created to really be able to help entrepreneurs in the region find that first check, because currently the sources are quite sporadic. And what we're finding is that even though an entrepreneur may raise some money locally, when someone else goes to that source, what they then get told is, well, we did that, it's a one-off thing. That's not really what we do. We're not in the tech space, or we're not really investors in this way, but we opted to support this opportunity based on, whatever may have validated it. So we see a need to fill now this funding gap, and are in the early stages of starting to pursue that.
Thank you so much, Kirk. So last but not least, we have a question for Pablo, and we're running out of time, so I'm just gonna shoot. So Pablo, Reach for Billions is coming into Central America with a very unique value proposition to help existing incubation programs consolidate their business models and build their capacity so that they can become more scalable and sustainable. Tell us about this model and what are the challenges and the solution you're proposing to help consolidate or accelerate this consolidation of innovation hubs in emerging markets.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nicole and Ruth, and thank you, IDB Lab, for inviting me. So just in a nutshell, Bridge for Billions, we build entrepreneurship programs, but we build them for entrepreneurs in the incubation stage. And one of the, since almost, it's going to be 2 years now that we entered the Central American ecosystem. And while there are some patterns that we've seen globally, I will say there are at least 3 obvious challenges that we find daily. The first one is that there is a lack of specialization within the different actors that support entrepreneurs. It's like if you want to go to a restaurant that serves Italian, French, and Spanish food, you won't eat the best paella there. And this is the reality in the Central American ecosystem. Part of the reason also is because they're very donor dependent. So there is funding, there is a program. There is no funding, there is no program. And this actually goes to the root cause of what we believe it's a critical component or a critical challenge is there is a lack of collaboration because of thinking that they're competing against the same donors and even for the same type of entrepreneurs. So there is no collaboration across actors. There is a lot of what we tend to call like ecosystems, where it's about me and not about ecosystems of collaboration. So what we proposed in Bridge for Billions in the reality is, okay, so if you want to build incubation programs, we can help you. And we have our entire technical methodology infrastructure to equip local entrepreneurship support organizations, incubators, chambers of commerce, even co-working spaces that want to launch incubation programs. And we do it together, but not independently. We do them as a network. We build these programs for 20, 30, 50 entrepreneurs in a more scalable way. And we provide our mentor network together with everyone's mentor network. And then together, we reduce the cost of these programs so that then the cost per entrepreneur is lower. And then these entrepreneurship support organizations can achieve a sustainable model where they are not so reliant on donor funding, which again makes the challenge of ecosystems. And that's our approach.
Thank you. And so we're reaching the end, almost the end of this panel, the final part, and we have 2 open questions. Let's see if we have time to answer both. We'll ask the first, and it's directed to all of you. So feel free to jump in one or the other where you think you can add more value to our audience with your experiences. So each of you work in different socioeconomic contexts within these emerging markets. Who are innovating in these markets, and how do you reach those who typically do not have either the opportunity or the access to these resources to actually innovate? And there's no order here, so the person who wants to jump in and give your perspective is very welcome.
So I'll try to be brief, but I think what's happening in the Caribbean is actually quite interesting. In many of the world's most successful ecosystems, what you see is that those who are most well-resourced in society are the ones that opt to lead the innovation revolution. We're seeing something very different in the Caribbean. It equally is exciting as it has some levels of disappointment in that the people that have the access and the resources seem to go overseas, study, make contacts, and etc., but opt to come home and either work in the family business or do something else of in a traditional nature, and are not the ones that are spearheading the innovation revolution. From an inclusive perspective, what's exciting is that those who are opting to do these things don't come from those means. But what we need to figure out is, how do we start merging these two groups in a way that starts to see the exchange of resources, so that ideas really can start to become as transformative as we all want them to be? Because as we know, without resources, it really is still just not going to happen. And that's the thing that we're noticing and trying to enact change within.
I will just add one thing. I totally agree, and I think that talent is everywhere, but the access to opportunities is really what's unequal. So once you already know that there is talent, a lot of the things that we see, it's the people that are innovating are the ones that are very in contact with the problems. And it is true that entrepreneurs from very privileged backgrounds, they might be solving problems that are very close to them, but not relatable to the population of their country. So those that have let's say, that are aware of smaller problems are the ones that have the most access to support. And those that are aware of the biggest challenges that we face, do not have the infrastructure, the support, mentoring, the training infrastructure. And this is happening for women, this is happening for entrepreneurs outside the big capitals, this is happening for entrepreneurs that do not come from the sexy, hot sectors. And this even happens for entrepreneurs that are 60 or older entrepreneurs. So the situation to me is not very promising, but again, if we work together, I think we can really enlarge the funnels.
And I actually want to take that last concept that you said, work together. I think we have time for the last question, at least one intervention. And it has been a common theme throughout our panel, that you all represent organizations with a regional focus that are building these innovation hubs in emerging markets. How do you actually bring together the actors within each ecosystem, and how do you connect them among countries or across countries? If one or two can jump in.
Building alliances. I think that's very important for us. In Caribe y Latam, we're very active in creating new alliances with other organizations, corporates, and different, not only in Panama, but in other countries in Central America and South America, in the region, even in the United States. So all these actors are important. They all have experiences. We can all share experiences, and based on those experiences, then build and unite our ecosystem. I think that's one of the most important things. And of course, our startups. We all mention it. They all need support, and I think that we can all jump in and make an effort to try to consolidate those programs and move on.
If I might just quickly as well, just jump in on that. I think part of it, and this is going along the lines that I initially had mentioned, is really the concept of a change in mindset as well. Because part of the issue, look, what drove the origination of 10 Habitat as well is that we, as Caribbean entrepreneurs, went on several trade missions across the globe to pursue business opportunities. But the greatest value was derived from connecting with other entrepreneurs from within the region who we were able to connect with and realize there was so much synergies that existed that were we able to collaborate, we can go after bigger market, larger opportunities, bring down costs, accelerate innovation. What we have to start to do is to understand that one, we are not competing amongst ourselves, but we are actually going from much larger pie, which is the world. And how can we compete on a larger scale by being able to change the mindset of collaboration and start to understand that if we reach out and we engage, then we can start to really build a responsive and I think a relevant ecosystem that facilitates the kind of innovation that we're talking about.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody. We're running out of time, so it's been a great opportunity to talk with everybody and to hear from very early stage efforts to community building all the way through to scale, and also looking and recognizing the importance and value of collaboration. And I think that's been the key theme across today's discussion is harnessing the opportunity for growth through these different types of collaboration. So I want to say thank you very much for everybody for such a rich discussion. And I hope that we continue the discussion and continue the engagement between Central America and the Caribbean across the ecosystems for innovation. So thank you very much, everybody, for participating in this session. Bye.